Welcome to Leadership Spotlight, a podcast that shines the spotlight on L&D and HR leaders from leading businesses around the world. Learn the ins and outs of everyday leadership, what it means to be a leader, and all the learning and skilling that goes into making a successful leader that you would like to follow. So lean in and lead on. A wise person learns from his mistakes. A wiser one learns from others' mistakes. But the wisest of all learns from others' successes, goes a Zen proverb. A rather simplistic definition of learning communities, but the very testimony to our evolution and existence. For Gautam Ghosh, blogger, speaker, writer, and ex-talent branding director of Flipkart, and ex-GM HR strategy and projects of Philips, it is what sets the framework for organizational learning and development. An XLRI alumni, he specializes in areas of human resources, organization development, and how businesses can leverage social learning for L&D. From building a business case for corporate communities of practice to giving practical, easy to adopt tools and techniques for incorporating them in training interventions, Gautam demonstrates his authority and know-how on all things learning communities. Hereon, as we unpack communities of practice. Hi, Gautam. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
Well, there is so much to speak about, but how I want to start this conversation to set the context is by understanding you and your journey to here and now.
I don't like to dwell too much on that. Primarily, if I can describe myself, I posted this on LinkedIn yesterday. My career is like I look at waves and I surf them. And I do unusual things before they become usual things. So a lot of times it's paid off, a lot of times it hasn't paid off. So that's my career in beginning from knowledge management to e-learning to traditional training and development to HR to social media consulting to employer branding. So I've kind of just I've built skills and I've seen what those skills can be applied to in the next wave. And I've kind of tried to keep my eye on where the next wave is coming from. It's paid off somewhere, it's not paid off somewhere else. So that's in a nutshell.
I appreciate your utmost honesty, Gautam, because not everyone will be able to share this a fact, but the way I look at it, I think it's great to be a square peg in a round hole, right? Because we are all being conditioned to act, behave, conform in a certain way, and it's nice to know of people who at least dare to challenge the status quo of what we have been conditioned to believe. Interestingly, because you speak about because you speak about the waves and being a surfer, there's a theory I heard not long time back in context of learning and development. It was by the L&D head of Raymond, and he spoke about the Baywatch theory. And what he meant is that it's always important to keep looking out for which is the next trend, which essentially is the next wave that you would like to ride on, and be mindful of what you're jumping onto, study it, and then you're able to make it a success or not. So that's my summarization of what you just told us as your journey. Is that correct?
Yeah, actually, I think John Hagel, who's with Deloitte, he wrote this book of what is happening at the edges. The waves happen at the edges. The tsunamis happen at the edges when they're least noticeable, but when they come, they are huge. So, what do you see happening at the edges will be mainstream tomorrow. But again,
Absolutely.
not every edge will come into the mainstream. So there are also, we shouldn't drag a metaphor also too much. Some edges will happen mainstream, some edges will die out. Some waves at the edges will die out, others will become tsunami.
Got that, got that. But in any case, whether it's a wave that is going to fizzle out or the one that's going to catch on more wind and become the tsunami that we speak of, you have spent a considerable amount of time in organizational talent development. And before we dig deep into that, let's talk about your views on learning as a social system. Because, quite honestly, learning in the community or social learning per se has been around as long as man himself. I think our very evolution and existence is the testimony of knowledge sharing in societal settings, oftentimes happening organically. What are your views on that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it became formalized in the Middle Ages, where you talk about guilds, about men and apprentices, or the Guru Shishya Parampara, where you learn from a person by staying with that person and observing. And I think I first came about it, realized it when I was in my first job, where we were talking about knowledge management, and there was this Japanese thinker who talked about there's no knowledge management, there's only knowledge creation.
Hmm.
And knowledge creation is about observing. A master craftsman, in his example about a noodle maker, can't really codify everything he knows verbally. There are some things that happen that are intuitive, which can't be really codified. But if you observe the master craftsmen, you learn from them. So that's when my journey to knowledge learning was really shaped by it. Ikujiro Nonaka was this person's name, and he actually refused being the chair of knowledge management at an American university, and he insisted it be called the chair of knowledge creation.
That's an interesting take on knowledge management as we know it. What I'm trying to infer from this conversation is that it's the tacit knowledge, something that resides in our head. Oftentimes, as you said, you cannot codify it. You cannot probably even verbalize it, put it into words, but demonstrate, which is where experiential learning comes in play. Is that the direction we are heading toward?
Yeah, we were there, but the scale was smaller. So a master craftsman could share his knowledge with a handful of disciples. But how do you scale that up? When you scale that up, you need to codify it somehow. And thanks to technology, you can codify, you can learn how, a master chef cuts a piece of meat, or salt, or put salt in a to so those are the things that you pick up by seeing. Technology enables that, and makes that small group into a larger group.
Got that. Yes, we will be talking about technology in just a bit. But what I now want to get into is the more corporate avatar of community learning, if you may, something that we are all familiar with, communities of practice. What is your business case for communities of practice or COP as it is called? Why should it matter to an organization at all?
My biggest grouse with corporate learning, if I can say that, is that corporate learning happens in a vacuum, and you don't really you learn theory. You learn it's 2 days. Say something as simple as time management or personal effectiveness training. Those are like 2 days. How do you implement that is where corporate learning fails. That's where a learning community or a community of practice can really help, because people can say, hey, I tried this work. Did you try this? What did your manager say when you tried this? So because each individual's experience after the learning is probably unique depending his or her context, but they can all learn from each other. So that's where I think a community of practice, but understanding practice for the learning intervention itself. It starts with interest. So if I'm interested in, say, astronomy
Yeah.
or
Okay.
quantum mechanics. I would want to be in a community where there are experts talking about quantum mechanics or astronomy. And by learning what they are sharing and therefore asking them questions, most relevant examples I have found in which most people understand is Flickr, which is unfortunately now almost dead. Flickr was a place where photographers could learn from other photographers. So you could share a picture, and other photographers would comment on how you can make that picture better. And you would learn terms around photography and techniques around photography because Flickr would also show which equipment, which a photograph has been taken in, where it has been taken in, geotagged, and etc. So I learned of terms like bokeh photography thanks to Flickr, and because it's a very technical term, most people outside of photography will not know it. But even dipping into Flickr, I discovered this whole. And not that I'm a great photographer anyway, but yeah, I discovered this community of people who are who became better photographers because of Flickr.
Understood. So what we are talking about is if we have to draw a virtual Venn diagram, perhaps we're looking at being in the domain, being in that same interest set, having the community of people who share similar interests, and then practicing it together, which
Yeah,
then kind of
and
creates a
and
small
the
intersection.
and the key there is people should be willing to give feedback. You should be willing to put yourself out. That should the vulnerability of putting someone out, putting your work out, saying, "Hey, I posted this," and knowing there are X number of people who are better than you in there, and hoping they'll give you feedback to improve.
Yes, I get it. And there is this famous saying, and because all of us are there on almost every social network out there, never let a compliment go to your head and never let criticism go to your heart. So, which is what you are also trying to say by vulnerability of someone putting his or her work out and being open for opinions, feedback, suggestions, because oftentimes that is where the most learning happens. We need to identify and appreciate every feedback that comes our way. Of course, we are going to discount the real naysayers from the list, but essentially the larger population is there to teach you and to make you a better
Yeah,
version of what you
the
are trying to achieve.
whole point of a community of practice, as different from a social network, is community of practice is around the interest area. So
Hmm.
the metaphor I talk about is like I've baked, I've made a pot of clay. When I put it into the community, it's getting baked. It's getting
Hmm.
heat. It's getting criticism. It's getting feedback, which will make that pot better.
Yeah,
So
I think it's a
social
wonderful
networks,
metaphor.
social networks are different things. Social networks are my social nodes. My friends from school might not be a community of practice because everybody is doing different things. Someone's a doctor, someone's a in home business, somebody's got a photography business. So a social network really does not give you valuable feedback. A community of practice is when people of the same interests, same professional interests, gather together and add to each other's knowledge.
Interest, I think, is the operating word here because without interest, you're merely just being a part of something that you may not even have the related knowledge or expertise on. So, yes, I think interest is key. Intent of sharing that with others is also key.
Absolutely.
Interestingly, I'm just going to quote this, which I read somewhere. I think it's a Zen proverb, and it goes something like this. I'm going to try and paraphrase. It said that a wise man learns from his mistake, a wiser one learns from others' mistake, but the wisest amongst all learns from others' successes. And that, for me, in a crux, is what COP is. Is that going too far, or is that along the lines that we are talking
No,
about?
I think each one has a grain of truth in it, and we should not rule out anything with which we can add value to ourselves.
Sure. So one thing is we've established so far is we need the interest, we need the intent, but there's a lot of collaboration that we are talking about. How do you think collaboration or COP really plays out in the digital VUCA world of today? I know we spoke about this briefly when we spoke about technology bringing scale, but how does it really play out for organizations in
This-
particular?
The key to collaboration first is sharing. I think I forget this person's name, Julian Stodd or whatever. He came up with a term called working out loud. So you share what you are working on at a particular moment of time. It should not be fully formed also. So you say, I'm trying to do a leadership development program. These are the 4 or 5 leadership development models I'm looking at. And then the community chimes in and says, have you looked at that? Have you looked at this? Have you looked at that? And then the concept evolves and you better. So if you work out loud and you say, hey, I'm thinking of doing this and I'm doing this. Do you guys have a better way of doing this? And then you can add a lot more value by the feedback. So first step is sharing before collaboration. By sharing, you invite feedback, and by feedback, you might go into collaboration. So if you draw on a XY axis, the lowest point is sharing, which does not come naturally to most of us in organizations because we do not want to acknowledge what we don't know. But if there's anything in learning and development that has taught me is that you cannot know what you don't know.
I think you hit upon a very important point, Gautam, that acknowledging what you know, or even better or for worse, what you don't know, is a real display of authenticity on one hand, but also vulnerability. And I would want to hazard a guess that I don't think most of us are okay with putting our egos on the line and have that kind of feedback come back to us. So, how do you think we can cultivate it? How can we, if we can cultivate it, that is?
I think the biggest uh, one one of my earliest bosses in L&D used to say that we specialize in the area of our weakness. So people who go into learning understand that they don't know learning, that they have enough to
Mm.
learn. And I think when I was growing up, that's a little personal thing. I used to talk to my grandfather, and he was like the most intellectual person I've ever met. And he used to ask me questions, and used to keep saying, I don't know the answer to this. And he said, your name should be I don't know Ghosh. And I think somewhere that struck me deeply. So my yearning in life was to know things. So I think I'm not sure whether this answers your questions in a certain way, but understanding what drives you, what pushes you to be who you are, is also key to self learning.
It does. For me, personally, it's having a white belt mentality. Always thinking that what I know is just a sliver of the knowledge spectrum, and not being absolutely, I'm not hassled extending that, that for support or saying that I really don't know this, and I would like for people to chime in and weigh in on something that I'm doing. But again, I think it's a personal trait, which is again something we need to cultivate amongst ourselves if we need to grow and self learn.
I think that again, one metaphor is if you're a small island in an ocean of knowledge, the boundaries of what you don't know is limited by the boundaries of the island. The more you increase the knowledge of that island, if the island grows bigger, the boundaries go bigger. You realize the more you know, the more you don't know.
Absolutely. Agreed. Agreed. So, yes, we spoke about sharing being the prerequisite to collaboration. But how do organizations actually incorporate this in their digital learning interventions? Because COVID has added to the digital push or digital transformation, and collaboration as we knew it has now moved from perhaps a in-person, face-to-face setting to a more virtual context.
Yeah, I think what is needed there is a very, you can't rely on technology alone. You have to have learning community managers who are driving those changes, who tell people. They could be communication professionals, they could be learning professionals, but some people who know, hey, this person asked that question, could you answer him? Because not everybody is clued into digital communication. So this is, you need a community manager, a learning community manager, a communication manager, whatever you choose to call him or her, to say, how do I use this tool to connect people who have questions to people who have answers? And for that, you need corporate yellow pages, external yellow pages, because not all answers are found within the organization.
Agreed. Yes, I think the inception of Web 2.0 and the social networking per se, it has pushed the envelope on collaboration and communities of practice. But it's important to identify, as you said, a learning community manager who kind of gets people on board with the idea and
Yeah.
ensures that there
So
is enough exchange of knowledge, which is where my second question lies, Gautam. How is this knowledge sharing moderated? Because at the end of the day, it is like putting all of the learners in their own driver's seat and with the hope that they will be driving towards the same destination. Do you think there is a level of moderation which is super essential, or do we then entrust it with the learners themselves to self drive themselves to where they want to go?
So I think in today's world, the learners are set, but what
Mhm.
learning community managers have to do is guide it to the understanding. Okay, you're at this assistant manager level. Which is the next three, four different roles you can look at? Because now roles are also not, careers are also not, ladders. They are lattices. You can be customer support today, you can be marketing tomorrow, you can be sales day after. How can you build all the skills that you need? Because that is the guidance that they need rather than exact skills. By saying, how can you grow tomorrow, and how can we help you grow into, so there are these, you're a R&D person. What do you need to learn about innovation? What do you need to learn about research? What do you need to learn about, how to transition from a R&D role to a CXO role? Those are the value adds that the L&D professional of tomorrow will do.
I agree. It has to be more broad based than being very narrowly focused to, as you said, a ladder versus a lattice, working in silos versus working in pods or cross functional teams, or maybe a
Yeah,
different team
and
altogether.
L&D has to get out of the content mindset. L&D has to think about how it can add value to the larger organization by helping people discover their own strengths and build on them.
Agreed. I think L&D now has to play the role of a facilitator, ensure that everything a learner needs today and tomorrow is available without assigning or without really putting the learner per se on a designated learning path.
No, in addition to that, how L&D can add value is how L&D can understand or help a learner understand what paths are open to him or her. So if you talk to me after I left XLRI that, I would be a social media manager or a employer branding professionals, all those skills are kind of evolving. Everything is coming every skill is evolving in 2-3 years. But how do you understand what your core strengths are and where you can apply them before something changes, before the next, how you can apply them in the next wave, if I can go back to my original metaphor.
Got that. Are we then speaking about the conversions of HR, OD, L&D all on the same page, having a unified, perhaps a system to look at, versus working in silos or different systems that are not able to
Obviously,
exchange the data?
if they work in silos, they'll never work.
All right, so with that, we're at the end of our conversation, Gautam. But before I let you go, we would like to know your leadership mantra.
My leadership mantra is to share my incompetence and help others develop them.
That's as authentic as I've gotten anyone really say it out loud as such. So, thank you so much for distilling your knowledge, your expertise in helping us understand the what, the why, and the how of communities of practice. It's been a truly, truly insightful conversation. So, thank you so much.
Thank you, Pranjali.
Thank you for tuning in to Leadership Spotlight. To learn how you can go from learning to leading, visit www.plathoralearning.com. See you next time.